Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you might be in the world. Nicola just says he can be excused because he's rocking the criminal look this evening, the criminal mastermind. We're discussing his lack of flying before we started. All right, I know what I'll start with. How many times have we all been contacted by the press and media about Colorado drones in the last week? This many for me was five times I've been asked, and 5 times my comments haven't come up anywhere because people don't like them because I say it's a load of nonsense. I think there is a chance. I don't know. What's your thoughts on it, Bruce? You've got a conspiracy theory video out there.
Yeah, it's not my conspiracy theory, but it is some people's conspiracy theory. I think actually I've been thinking about it long and hard, and what I believe is that obviously the FAA didn't put these drones up, but I'm pretty sure that they have a good idea who put the drones up. And I've seen some false statements because these things are being flown at night. Now, you can't fly you can't fly a drone beyond visual line of sight without a waiver from the FAA, unless you're military. So I'm thinking if these were being flown line of sight, then it would be a fairly trivial job to track down the control and command center, the operators, because they would be probably less than a mile from the actual drones themselves. Yet people have looked extensively and couldn't find them. Therefore, they must be flown beyond visual line of sight, which means either there's a waiver, or they're military, or they're being flown illegally. Now, authorities have come out and said there's no laws being broken here, so they can't be flown illegally, which only leaves the possibility of them being flown with a waiver, in which case the FAA know exactly who they are because the FAA issues the waivers, which includes all the details of where they're flown and when they're flown, or they're military. So there we go. The fact that nobody has actually put much effort into tracking them down is probably because it suits the narrative at the moment that, as Elaine Chao said, this is the reason we need electronic ID, because these people are being scared by these drones. Well, the reality is they're way out in the middle of nowhere. They're not jeopardizing any personal property. So why are they even being investigated? And they're not really. The FBI's got involved. And this is, again, it's kind of, I don't understand. If there's no laws being broken, why are the FBI involved? Surely they've got better things to do than to chase people who aren't breaking the law. That just doesn't gel. There are so many disparate pieces to this puzzle that don't fit, that you really have to say, well, it may not be a conspiracy, it may not be a false flag, but certainly a lot of people are using this to their own advantage to pursue their particular narrative and to push certain agendas. And I don't think that's acceptable.
I don't quite get to Greg's watch the lights during the landing reference. There's been loads and loads of videos. And stuff. So I'm not quite keeping up with that, but I can believe that that one set of sightings is near a US base that perhaps has got some counter-terrorism or counter-drone stuff tests going on. Because at the end of the day, if you really wanted to not make a fuss, you'd switch the lights off on the things, wouldn't you? If they were that clandestine. It's just I long for the days when they would have just been dear old UFOs, traditional, plain old, simple UFOs, instead of being drones in formation. So yeah,
I think we'll have to start flying drones around Roswell and see what the media says then. Are they UFOs or are they drones? Which is going to be the stronger narrative if you fly them at Roswell?
I think there can be no end of young malcontents going out there now and causing mischief with model aircraft that are illuminated, because I know I would if I was over there. So surely there must be some people doing that by now as well, and just you can imagine a whole load of models stuck together with sticks to make them appear to be like a big formation and things like that. That must be going on. And yeah, we need some evidence. A requirement to maintain lights for night operations. So follow the lights to the landing location. Of course, Greg. Yes, of course they'll follow the law. That's definitely what they'll do. So what else has happened this week? So Elaine Chao's. Why aren't we complaining to Elaine Chao about remote ID? Why is she not being written to, emailed?
I gather it's because a lot of people don't hold her in high regard due to various things. I'm not going to say anything because I don't know the facts, and there's potential defamation there. So I would just say a lot of people do not hold her in high regard in her position, the position that she's in. Speaking of not holding things in high regard, I'm sure we all watched the CES presentation, which featured Josh Bixler, a woman from a drone training school, a representative of the AMA, and a representative from the FAA. It was a very interesting presentation and very, very, what do you call it? Damaging, I believe, for the AMA's reputation within the hobby. What you saw, Gary? What did you think?
Well, I think Josh at the end of it very nicely pointed out numbers details. Hopefully he'll join us this evening, actually. Yeah, he did an excellent job. The bottom line, he did an excellent job, and thank goodness he was there for our side, because that panel could easily have had, for someone from the counter UAS industry, for instance, that could have completed it rather than Josh, and then we would have been in trouble. I have been re-watching plenty of episodes of Silicon Valley just to remind myself. I don't know if you've seen it, Bruce and Nicola, but to remind myself of the sort of industry we're actually in, because it's perhaps a more accurate documentary on the state of the union and a lot of other things. And I did think of that when I was watching that. I was thinking about the tech crunch disrupt speeches that they go to.
Another one worth watching, actually, if you can get a hold of it, is Halt and Catch Fire. It's a really good series. It's an analog of the Apple story. It was brilliant. I watched it several times. I love it. It's a great thing. If you're around at the time, it brings back lots of memories.
Halt and Catch Fire. Look, I'm writing that down and right back. Thank you very much. No GA below 2K. Of course, I don't really mean that, because I like flying. I like flying stuff. But we've got to start taking the fight to them. Or actually, my conspiracy theory is that actually GA will be the next people dragged in and properly wrapped up in all this nonsense in one way or another. I think it's going to affect them.
One thing we have to do, I think, is wake up GA up to the fact that it's going to cost them money. But also, I'm looking, as you know, at various strategies to address the public opinion on these drones and all that sort of stuff. And I came up with a new one this week, which I'm not going to tell everyone about, but I think it could be quite successful. And so my, I'm not going to go propaganda, I'm going to education campaign through the media is just about in a position where I can start enacting it and hopefully getting some traction within the media, because we've seen just how easily the public are manipulated by the media with this Colorado drones thing. I mean, look, evil drones in Colorado. So we need to use that. That's the only weapon we've got, is the public. It's the only thing, because so many people I've spoken to who are in a position to know have said, it doesn't matter what people say in their submissions, the FAA is going to do what the FAA wants to do. It's just a formality, this submission process. Nobody is going to change anything because of a submission or 100,000 submissions.
Yeah, well, yes, I suppose so. I suppose you're right. But then do you not submit? Do you just roll over and die? You
have to submit, because then you can say, look, that becomes a small component of the total strategy. If you don't submit, then they can turn around and say, well, nobody's concerned that nobody made a submission. So you've got to remove that defense for the things that you bring up. You can't have them saying that. So everyone has to make a submission. But I would say make a submission closer to the end of the submission period, which is March the 2nd, because then instead of being able to go through them as they come in and ease the workload, they're going to have to do it all at once. When the submissions close, it's going to make it harder for them. And it also means that you've got more time to come up with a good submission. And the quality of submission is very important, because they will be looking for any excuse to bin your submission. If it's, for example, the AMA with their form letter, they're all going to get stuck in one file and treated basically as one submission, no matter how many of them are filed, because they all say the same thing. Okay, that submission said this, and there were 10,000 copies of it. It's not the same as having 10,000 unique submissions, all individually worded by people who have a passion for what they're saying.
Yeah, well, I think they've already had far more. The last one that happened in the UK, thankfully, finally, people woke up and responded. And whilst it might not have changed a lot, it did frighten. Did frighten the CIA a little bit. And Patrick, I've sent you a link in the email. I've sent you a link. He asked to join. I've sent you the link, Patrick. I've sent you the link.
You're letting Patrick in. Oh, my standards have slipped.
I know. Well, before he gets here, we can talk about it. I think he's going to make comments about the previous NPRMs at which we used to have the counter ticking down in the corner. He's on his way. Oh, here he comes. A counter ticking down in the corner to when one of the national proposed rulemakings was going to happen. And that counter then turned into a counter that was counting up from when it was supposed to have happened. They take weeks and weeks and weeks, and months and years. But I have a feeling this one's going to go through with some alacrity and force. I think they want this, and they're going to push for it. Sadly. No, he's not here yet. He's still not here. Have you frozen? No, you've not frozen, Bruce. So, all right, while we're waiting for him, what else has caught our eye this week? Not a great deal. It's not been a huge week, has it? It's just everyone's been flat on their faces with these flipping regulations. What have you been flying, Nicola? You must have been flying something this week.
Yeah, my imagination.
Oh, okay. He's here now. We can behave. He's here now. All right, Sir Patrick, NPRM. Now, why are you putting NPRM then in your heading?
Well, because I'm an NPRM kind of guy. That's what I do. I've been doing it for a while. But, people are like, oh, hey, you got to do the NPRM. And I would agree for those of you in countries where your government still represents you, it's a great idea. However, I think I've alluded to this before in the past here. The FAA is under no legal obligation to change one word of the proposal due to public comments. Now, I'm not going to say that you shouldn't comment to NPRM because, it's like voting, right? You guys have voting in your countries. And, when you vote, you hope that, like, when you go out there, it's like, perfunctory. I pull the lever and, hopefully my guy is going to win, right? If the Russians don't get involved. But anyway, it doesn't matter. So the thing that you have to think about is people are the FAA doesn't have the manpower to go investigate tips of people flying on ineffective waivers. They don't have the power to go out and investigate the American Gatwick out there. They don't have the manpower to do doodly squat, but they're going to be able to, collate, enter all of these comments and written in letters and all the rest of that stuff. Anybody who believes that nonsense, I'm getting to be like a Bruce curmudgeon. I don't know how old you are, Bruce, but I'm catching up to you there, buddy. It's all nonsense. It is all, unbelievable to me that people believe and buy all of this, what I like to call weapons grade BS. The battle has been lost, and the battle was lost when everyone just sat back and waited for the advocacy groups who were bootlicking and looking for doggy biscuits sold you right down the river. So change it, but it's going to take a different. It's not going to be NPRM comments.
So cheery, such a cheery welcome to the chat there from Patrick. No, I don't.
Right? You know the ropes.
Yeah. It's been very hard, hasn't it? Been shouting and jumping up and down about all this for years, and it's finally come to be. And just saying "I told you so" really isn't that satisfying as a feeling.
No, it's horrible. It'd be great if, like, oh yeah, we have common sense regulation, and I told everyone it was coming. God, it'd be great. People go, oh, you said this was going to happen. Are you happy? How can I be happy about an unmitigated disaster?
But I think surely, it is so badly done. Surely there must be some grown-ups in the loop there somewhere that are going to say, hang on a minute.
Well, let's just say, I have been getting the calls, from people in the emails. What do we do? We're going to, and they say, I'm ready to raise some money. Oh, good. Okay. Well, you absolutely, oh yeah, I think I can, raise $5,000, I don't want to bring anyone down to Chinatown, but, you're not going to affect, change regulatory change on the federal level was $5,000. These companies, like the Chinese toy company, are spending about $100,000 a year on lobbying the states. It doesn't include the feds, So, you got to step up your game. The community has to, you're going to have to kick in hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I think that the other thing people have to understand is your advocacy groups like AMA. I know that the trolls are after me on the AMA, but think about it, that there are a 12, 15, $18 million a year budgeted group, grassroots group with hundreds of thousands of members. And as far as I'm concerned, the FAA took them to the woodshed repeatedly, and that was even after being tipped off by all kinds of people. So people say, you're breaking the windows over there at the AMA, but I contend that the barn's burned down. So the windows are kind of superfluous at this point.
As Bruce, I think you remember we spoke before, the Josh at the CES, he did, well, maybe you can tell the story of how he put them in their place, rather.
Yeah, because the AMA has been saying we are the largest model flying organization in the world. 200,000 members. Look at us, we're big. And then Josh Bixler sort of went through their stats, and just from the YouTube channel alone, they have 1.2 million subscribers, 800,000 of which are from the USA. So their audience on YouTube from within the USA is 4 times the AMA's membership base, which kind of speaks to the way the hobby has changed. The AMA is increasingly representing the graying out of the hobby, the old guys flying their little nitro trainers around grassy fields and control line and free flight and that sort of thing. Just fine. I enjoy all those elements of the hobby as well. But they sort of focused on the past, and they're just dwindling into obscurity and irrelevance as the whole hobby changes. Now you've got people like the Flight Test, which is by far and away a much bigger representative body for the hobby. But the AMA, and at the end of the whole presentation, when they were given a few minutes to say basically whatever they wanted, Josh Bixler turned around and said that he was deeply concerned about the effects that electronic ID would have on STEM programs, on the hobby, and because of that, on the way that people follow through from the hobby to manned aviation. It's going to have a chilling effect on the whole thing, and he raised his concerns about that. When the AMA had their turn, they said, we're really happy that the FAA will finally be recognizing CBOs, and we're one. I mean, excuse me, but it's all about us AMA, whereas Josh Bixler was obviously more concerned about far beyond a group of people flying gas planes around a grassy field. He was concerned about the education, the hobby, and the flow-on effects to full-size aviation. So the AMA just lost themselves. They're just, wandering in a field, and, I don't know what's going to happen to them. But they think they're doing really well. They're happy with their performance. And after Section 336 and the way they completely failed to make any changes to that, you think they would wake up and say, this is funny. The FAA tells us they're working with us and they're our friends and we're partnered, but they've completely ignored us. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. And it's going to happen again.
Well, I have to disagree, Chris. They have done wonders for the Chinese, let's say, drone hardware manufacturers. It's been I would call it a boon, all of the regulation and policy that the FAA has come up with here. The other thing you have to realize with the AMA is that this has been going on, and Gary probably remembers because there was this malcontent on RC groups back in the early 2000s. Who was saying, hey, the FAA is talking about aviation. You remember that, Gary?
Yeah.
Okay, and so I remember pish paw, never going to happen. And what happened was the AMA went to the Congress, and they had to testify. And the other thing is now we have the AOPA jumping in here, and you probably remember this, Gary, because people are like, well, the AOPA. I'm not enamored with the AOPA, and the reason I'm not is because the AOPA was the junkyard dog that basically made all of this happen. They were the ones that went to the FAA and said, hey, you got to do something here. FAA was like, we don't want to do anything about that. And then they went to Congress. Congress had a hearing. We were outed. The RCAPA was outed as advocating for the commercial use of unmanned aircraft for, aerial photography, whatever else. And they said, hey, you got to bring these hobbyists under control. AMA gets there. We don't want to do. I mean, they pretty much got up there and testified and said, we don't want to have anything to do with this. Don't contact us. At the time, AC 9157 that the AMA had on their website was, you remember this? Not to fly with
Carefree days of AC 9157.
Or you could put your own, punctuation in there. You get it to say pretty much whatever you wanted it to say. Wink, wink, nod, nod. And anyway, fast forward from the 2005, they were like, we don't want to deal with this at all. Heads in the sand. 2008, we're doing the ARC. ATO comes out. We're writing the rules for the hobbyist. If you're not on the hobby field, you're not a hobbyist. Have a nice day. I mean, so this is not. It's like a slow burn, That
was a key statement then, because that statement was made in 2008. If you're not on the hobby field, you're not a hobbyist. So people that it's just a shame that people believe this has only happened like in the last 2 years. But I remember that in 2008.
The AMA,
you're not a hobbyist.
Yeah, the AMA are basically pushing that as well, because you're flying an AMA field if you're a hobbyist. So they're disadvantaging all those other 600,000 people who fly model aircraft not on AMA fields.
Well, here, the other in the ARC, the FAA sat right there and said, how many hobbyists are there that are not AMA members? And Rich Hansen says, 5,000. And I did the same thing you did, Bruce. I was like, what? You got to get on RC grips, because there's hundreds of thousands of people on that, and talking to the manufacturers. Manufacturers are like, there's, hundreds of thousands, probably a million people out there flying, besides the AMA membership. The AMA also had a group of manufacturers and distributors. They had a star chamber. The other thing that people have to, this is like the tell-all book here on the AMA. The other thing is the AMA, anytime there was like a whiff of money in the air, they ran off and they were following it. There was a plan. Let's talk about harebrained. They were entertaining a plan where they would have DoD vendors test Scan Eagles at their flying sites for money, of course. To use the site to test your. And I was like, that's insane. Okay, as soon as the public finds out, that you're flying, military systems out at the park, they're going to get upset. 1, 2, when those military systems leave the reservation and crash into, Aunt Mildred's house down on Mulberry Street, you're going to have problems. Well, we'll deal with all of that. This is a income stream or an avenue for revenue for us and growth, What?
Well, that leads you're sort of leading into the test sites then, which is another huge stuff up on the part of the FAA. When was that? About 2015, 14? I can't really remember.
Yeah.
2012, was it something like that?
You want to go into the history lesson on that?
That's part of that 2008 sort of conversation. All that stuff was people suddenly saw, as you've said, the dollar signs coming out. Oh, they could come and test at our place, and we'll do this, and we'll do that, and
it got even
that was a
Gary, because the DoD vendors, that whole test site thing came out of the ARC, and it was a way for DoD vendors. Okay, I don't know how the militaries work in your country, but here, you gotta. Fool us 15 times. You're a DoD vendor. We have to see the shit work before we write the check. Because we've taken people's word for this. That doesn't work. So, we had this war on terror thing going. You guys probably read about it in the paper. And, when you're selling these systems, you got to fly them, right? So the DoD vendors are like, hey, it's getting expensive. I got to go out here to YPG and spend, $50,000 a week to, So we need these test sites. That's where the test sites came from. It was going to be some sort of private public thing. And then when the DoD vendors found out that all of the information would be FOIA-able over there, dropped that like a hot rock. They changed it. Then they decided these test sites were going to be around the country. I saw the language prior to the 2012 reauthorization. Okay. Basically, the Congress told AUVSI, you guys write whatever you want within reason. Don't go crazy now. You know, you can write what you want here. And they came back with that cockamamie language for the test sites. And I told the guy, he now works over at Amazon, and Amazon's delivering packages already, right? And I told him, I said, look, there's no mention in here of any funding. There's no milestones. Notifications for no action. This isn't gonna work. All right,
Yeah.
smart guy, you write something yourself. I'm like, all right, I got a computer, I can do that. So that's what happened with the test sites. Now, test sites, everybody, it didn't really work out. They already had one down there at New Mexico State, and New Mexico State couldn't make it pencil. They have a beautiful, it's right behind White Sands, the Oregon Mountains there. Couldn't make it pencil. So what did they do? The FAA gave Boeing in situ a waiver to fly up at Boardman Airport, which is a Class G airport, and they were training. You couldn't do commercial, but they were training civilian contractors at $40,000 a seat to fly Scan Eagles, because when you leased a Scan Eagle, you had to have in situ training. If you didn't have in situ training, couldn't fly, and you had to go up there and you had to get trained. I knew people that sat in the class, and they were like, "Hey, how did you guys? How the waiver to fly here and charge money?" And it was actually dragged out of the class and told to shut the F up about it. Square game.
But then if we still want to go down the Scan Eagle's a great aircraft, a great company in situ, but the other one that immediately makes me think of the University of Alaska Fairbanks, who had the largest fleet of Scan Eagles outside of the military to go and save the SEALs.
Are you talking about the Arctic Shelf shell game that was going on up there?
Oh, the shell game. Why would you call it a shell game, I wonder? Who's shell? Who's shell?
Yeah, exactly. It was a bag of shells to be made there.
Yes, so there was lots of shenanigans back in the day, and that's a true story, dear viewer. University of Alaska Fairbanks did have a fleet of Scan Eagles, and they may or may not have been paid for by an oil company who may or may not have been prospecting with them up in the Arctic where they weren't allowed to. Maybe, maybe not. Who knows? Maybe a shell game.
It's funny is that I asked for a waiver like that, or the one that they had to train, in situ had to train. I go, look, I'm not looking for anything special. I just want to train civilian contractors, just like in situ. They didn't think it was too funny.
Yeah. So there have been no end of shenanigans, and the FAA needs to be held to account for a little bit, and perhaps the runway for that's see what I did there, is being created by Boeing at the moment, and what's going on with the MAX. Perhaps closer scrutiny of the FAA and how decisions are made could be legitimately made. Do you think that's a play, Bruce?
What?
Well, I have to go. You've got to get the FAA needs some scrutiny. They need a proper looking at, a proper scene to.
But they need oversight. But who do you get to oversee the FAA? Because as you go up the chain, things seem to get worse and worse. It's interesting. Boeing is having its own problems, though, aren't they? Because they had like the MAX 8, then they had that space thing that didn't dock with the ISS because it missed its trajectory. And I gather they're now trying to get into the UTM business, Gary.
Bugger. I may have received an email from, hang on, let me have it's not supposed to be out. No, they're not. Not according to nothing I've read this week. No,
I thought you must have received something, but no, I heard through the back door from another source. Yes.
Where is that? I can't find the flip. There you go. Let's search for it. Yeah, they are. But what made me laugh the most was standby caller, as it's come up. SkyGrid, a Boeing Spark Cognition company, is building an aerial system to enable the next generation of autonomous aviation, powered by, yes, AI and blockchain. Ding, 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 ding. First prize. First prize.
3D renderings to follow.
I wanted to introduce myself as your primary point of contact. We'll have some exciting new developments to share in 2020. I'm sure to keep you in the loop. So there we are. I can't wait.
So I would trust them to control the navigable airspace. Certainly, absolutely. Am I lying?
Blockchain and that. Can't go wrong. Blockchain and AI, you can't go wrong.
Maybe they could talk to Uber about doing up one of those sizzle reels for the UAM with the lens flare and the girl on the phone. That would be great.
Well, it's this rush to the first 400 feet of air that is not going. We just know it's not going to work. You just anybody that has made their own multi-rotor or fixed-wing model aircraft knows how hard it is. They know you can't just. You just intuitively know it's not as easy as these people think.
But you can see that this is typical of the people making the decisions, the people with the money. They don't know what they're doing. They rely on other people who are going to feed them a line in order to get what they want. It's like there's such a big disconnect, and this is the way it's worked for many years. So it's not whether your project will fly, but whether you can convince people it will fly. And
True.
it's like it's the tapping of white canes. The people with the wallets are just throwing money at whatever sounds really good. And because, as you say, I really don't think, surely the people at Amazon are not stupid enough to believe that they're going to have fleets of delivery drones dropping $2 and $3 items on people's back doorsteps and then flying back. If they believe that, then we're in serious trouble. If that's the caliber of our decision makers in corporate America, I think China's got nothing to worry about. It's going to become the world's largest superpower, and America is just going to dissolve into a heap of stupidity led by the FAA.
It already has. We've been sold out.
Oh.
Sold.
I can see there being a huge rush to be the UTM to make sure that you shut down, even if you're not going to use the airspace, because it'll never work. If you control the airspace or you control the regulator enough that you effectively do, then you're going to stop the next person that might anyway. So Boeing, Google. Well, we know that Google's got a hat in the ring. We know that Airbus has. Who else are the other? Amazon's having a go as well. So this, who will they really give up sovereign rights to the first few hundred feet of airspace?
Is this a bit like radio spectrum, where when a piece of radio spectrum is released, everybody wants to stake their claim, perhaps not even because they want to use it, but they know that it's a finite resource, and if they own some of it, the value of that is going to increase over time as the demand increases, supply and demand. So perhaps by nailing their claim or staking their claim now, Amazon and Google and all are simply saying, well, we probably won't actually really use it, but somebody will eventually, and if we own a right to it, we can sell that for a huge amount of money. In the meantime, let's get these pesky modelers out there. Even though we're not using it, we can't have them using it because they may end up with some kind of grandfathered right to use, and we don't want that. So get them out early, so they've got no existing rights, and then we can just make money out of it.
Yeah, I think that is.
Do you have that deal that Google had, Gary, that they did at the NASA UTM kickoff?
Did you see the report on that? Which deal are you talking about then? The
graphic where they had the. I'm going to see if I can find it. I'll send it.
Yeah, you put it up because there has been a report, a PDF kicking about that latest trial. And,
I got a conflagration or a dust up going on LinkedIn about that because there's no mention of the non-cooperative aircraft that invaded their airspace, both at Reno and Corpus Christi. And the guy who's heading up the UTM for NASA says that, they didn't think that was really relevant. They had it closed down, or the report would have never gotten out. But I would believe that any fair-minded person would think that, the service providers that were monitoring the airspace would include non-cooperative aircraft, fair-minded person, but I guess I'm a nitpicker, even though we've all, spent $89 million on the deal, leave that out.
I'm not intrinsically against UTM. The airspace system does need to be updated. There could be no doubt of that.
I think what you say is true. But don't we need to make this huge distinction between controlled and uncontrolled airspace? I think in uncontrolled airspace, you don't need a UTM because then it would be controlled airspace. And the trouble is that the way this NPRM is going ahead, you can have manned aviation without even the need for a VHF radio flying in Class G airspace. No need for a radio, no need for ADS-B. You got a 251-gram model aircraft or a drone. It's got to have electronic ID. And if a manned aircraft flies through an area, they become non-cooperative operator. If a drone does the same thing, then it becomes an offender. There's no parity here.
I got to go one further. I'm all for airspace systems and control and all the rest of this stuff, but I don't really believe it's a value. And one, because let's talk about controlled airspace. Let's talk about airspace where there's low density. You can get one of those engineering graphs, default, your safety risk analysis of airspace with nobody in it. Blah, blah, blah. Do you really need UTM? No, you don't. The other issue you have here is no one, including NASA, and I know because I've asked, hey, do you have any traffic data for any of these airspaces below 400 feet? Does anybody know what's going on in there? No, nobody knows. So you're trying to build a system for or a solution for a problem that has yet to be quantified. Then can I go back to the RID thing? Another bone of contention.
Yeah, you can go back to that. Yeah.
I want to believe that RID is going to facilitate beyond visual line of sight and flying over people. I do. I want to believe, but I doubt that it is going to get that. And why is it going to get that? What are we seeing with the Matrice 210?
The rain.
Not only the rain, but everybody knows, and DJI has admitted that there's a battery charge algorithm problem, and they know about it, and there's issues with this. And I've been saying it, and I said it years ago, that when these start falling out of the sky indiscriminately, the public acceptance is going to tank, okay? So over here in the United States, I don't know how it works for you guys, but if you want an over people waiver, you have to go to one company that has the last administrator of the FAA as a board advisor. Don't even put it in the waiver that you're going to buy, or this is what you plan. You have to buy the waiver first, or forget it. Or the parachute system first, or don't even apply for the waiver. You're not getting it. It's a non-starter. Does that sound like some kind of square deal to anyone? Then you got the other one, and the last time I was on, and I forget the gentleman's name, he mentioned it. You think you're going to fly in Class Bravo airspace with no detect and avoid?
Yeah.
And I just don't see it. And then, you were talking about Boeing UTM with AI. How are you going to certify AI?
Yeah. Well, that's across many. Whenever the AI card's pulled out, I need a set of cards for that, don't I? Across multiple industries, people say that, and across multiple industries, it's not gonna be put in charge for a long time.
Well, if you give it a gun, to me, you just give it 2 guns, and I'm guaranteeing that the AI will work. No problem.
Let's look at this. Let's look at this this graphic you wanted me to put up while we're here. What did you want to say about this?
Well, if I was, let's say I was in a this was put up at the first NASA UTM meeting, okay, public meeting. They did have a meeting before, but this was like when everyone came, and NASA was putting out the emails for the Silicon Valley chapter of AUVSI that was throwing this big party that they made a ton of money. I heard they cleared like 90 grand on this deal. I mean, it's nice work if you can get it. But anyway, whatever the case. So this graphic kind of caused a little controversy because there was a concept where like under 200 feet, you'd kind of be able to do what you want to do. But over that 200 feet, you might have to get permission to transit through that airspace. And first thing I said, because people were like, well, what do you think about that? And I said, it's like bandwidth. As I think Bruce mentioned before, if you have this bandwidth model, you really don't have to do anything but sell people access to a natural resource. It's like it's like it makes its own gravy, like a Google thing. And that's exactly what this plan is here. Google's got a plan to manage the airspace too. If you have to pay somebody, which all of these guys, nobody's doing this out of the kindness of their heart, you're going to have to pay to get into a natural resource, landing fees, takeoff fees, whatever. There'll be some kind of scheme where your credit card is going to have to be linked to your RID and your UTM so you can fly. And again, I don't think this is a burden that hobbyists should have to pay, or even mom and pop should have to pay. Amazon should build their own network. Google should. You want to deliver burritos? Build your own network.
Yeah, look, it's all a nonsense. I've said it again. I'll say it again. I was in 2010. I was in a farmer, and the lady from Amazon came and said stuff. The bloke from the CIA next to me said, "Oh, never happen. We'll never allow that." Quietly, just only so a couple of us could hear that. But they had a very, very similar picture to that, and everyone in the room was, "What? Hang on, you've come over here. You come over here with your nylons and chocolate, and you're telling us this?" It was nonsense. It was all nonsense from day one. But it seems to me they're winning. As we can all shake and rattle and roll, they seem to be winning.
Well, they're winning because there's no credible, let's say, advocacy. How this game works, and this is from what I've seen. The FAA promises a business or a group some sort of wink wink nod nod thing, and people toe the line and they go with it and they say, "Oh, this is great." Oh, you want us to go out there and say that the hobby is unsafe? No problem. I go out there and do it. And they'll go out there and do that. And they think that they're going to run their business model out. And they're going to make money and be able to pay their investors. It's really a short-sighted thing. Early on, the AMA should have mobilized their membership. Same with AUVSI, which I'd laid out plans for both groups, but nobody wanted to hear it. Go out, mobilize the membership, go grassroots, but instead, advisors told them to hire lobbyists. And this is another thing with the AMA. AMA has spent millions of membership dues on lobbying. And I mean, I would say that the membership did not get their money's worth.
Can you prove that, though? I mean, that's a big thing to say.
Sure, yeah, you can. This isn't, what I think or, whatever. You can go and you can look. There's a form called a 990, and it's an IRS tax form. Okay, the 990 is basically a tax form for these groups that are 501c3 and 501c6. And people may remember, I haven't done a story about the AMA. I've really tried to give the AMA a wide berth on this deal because, I hoped that one day they'd get it together. They never did. But I did do a story on AUVSI and their 990s. And there was a group that just constantly, they mantra of, we don't have the money to do anything. They never had the money to do anything. So I asked to see the books. They said no. This is when I was chapter president, Silicon Valley chapter president. They told me I was asking dangerous questions. Okay. So I had to get the 990s myself. Anyway, it turns out, these guys had $4 million in the bank. They were bringing in $12 million a year. People were getting bonuses. People's husbands were getting consulting contracts. Everybody was wetting their beak. Meanwhile, the membership is over here starving because they can't work commercially and they couldn't sell due to ITAR. And I'm like, well, you think you want to help the membership out? So anyway, I ran through it. It talks about people's salaries, whatever else. I will say that the cursory review of the AMA documents, I cannot find what they're paying Hanson, what they've been paying Rich Hanson, and I cannot find what Chad's making or any of the other, let's say upper management people. And people at AVSI were like, oh, you're coming after people personally, if you talk about how much money they're making. And it's not really personal. I mean, I don't care. Look at that guy Gary from CES. That guy is killing it, man. He gets up there, he talks to people. That dude is as smooth as silk. Okay, and I'm sure he's making millions a year, whatever. I don't know what the guy's making, but he's worth it. And that was the same thing I said about AVSI. If you're putting points on the board, same with AMA, you're putting points on the board. I don't care what they're paying you. God bless, you're doing a great job. If you're not putting points on the board, it looks bad. It looks like you're wasting membership money, to me.
So we are, what are we? We are, sort of a month and a half to go until the comments. March the 2nd, isn't it? That the comments period ends for this NPRM. So a month and a half to go. Bruce recommends everyone does it in the last week, so they still have to keep looking at it. So what happens after that? Nothing for 2 years, or do they ram this through quick?
I don't see. I mean, there's so many issues with security, and behind the scenes right now, the FAA is playing it very quiet with the MAX. I mean, have you guys been seeing some of these articles?
Yeah,
the inter-office memos about the monkeys, and I mean, it is so bad, so bad. It's incredible to think that this is actually happening in the United States of America right now.
Well, but the Boeing, I mean, it's Boeing. It's just a name that is synonymous with it's going to work. I ain't going if it ain't Boeing, and so much trust you have in that company. And when really quite, so some of the airline officials from overseas airlines were really not that high up in the airlines were saying, hey, hang on a minute, why don't we do it like this? Or can we do it like this? And they took them down. Oh, there goes anti-bear, man. It's bad news all the way around. And I think that's why the FAA and Boeing and all that needed a jolly good looking into. Jolly good seeing too. Good evening to you, anti-bear man. Can you hear us over?
Sorry, I've done the I've forgotten what time zone I'm in thing again, and I'm sitting here thinking we'll be on in 10 minutes.
Is that what it's like in Wales? Is Wales like in a?
Completely forgot the time zone shifted about 6 months ago.
Fair enough. Yeah,
I do apologise. And that's me coming on thinking 10 to. I'll be about 10 minutes early. Job done. Sorry, gents.
That's all right. That's all right. We've just moved to. Well, you probably caught that last, but we'll put it back to Patrick, and then we'll bring you in to tell us about Bayer.
Well,
so where are you going, Patrick?
Oh, well, I mean, it's if you read some of the articles that were in Der Spiegel, I mean, some of the FAA people were like, I was on drugs, or I would have never went along with. I mean, it's so bad. It is so bad. And really, I mean, I can't see where Boeing is going to just ride this out. There's going to be ramifications, but it also goes back to the FAA is supposed to be, working in the public trust, right? And they fall down on the job. I got a whole nother story here, Gary, about the Precision Hawk Beyond Visual Line of Sight waiver.
Did you see people? I don't know why they started posting stuff from 2 years ago that Precision Hawk put out today. It's been doing the rounds on social media. Look, this is how you do it. And I may have been pointing out, You mean the illegal BV loss experts? It's
This thing, I mean, you know, if you want to, I don't know if you want to go there right now. If you want to go into this investigation now, I started in an investigation. It's got to be, I mean, we're going to be rolling around on a year here pretty quick, but an actual real investigation was initiated in June of 2019. If you want to talk about it now, I can overview. If you had something else you want to talk about, you want to do it later because it's going to get a little involved, you let me know.
I'm just already looking forward to the lawyers' emails and things I'm going to receive as a basis of your hidden conversations again.
Well,
Here we go. But it's a good one. No, it's a good one. Well, go on. You keep going. Let's have that first, and because Ian's good for another hour because he's only just arrived.
Yeah.
So the bulletin. Tell us a basic story, Patrick, for those that weren't following along.
Okay. Well, I noticed that Precision Hawk, and I'm going to try and do a Cliff Notes version because it gets convoluted really quick. But that's how this stuff works. But FAA, safety of the nest. Okay, sounds good. Thomas Hahn worked at Precision Hawk. He was the guy who got the Part 107.3.1 waiver, which is beyond visual line of sight. He was the responsible party. The responsible party is responsible for making sure that the company is in compliance and doing everything safely, record keeping, all the rest of that, right? He leaves the company. He's gone for 10 months. Nobody even notices the guy's gone, and Precision Hawk and their subsidiaries are flying all around the country beyond visual line of sight, working on contracts for PG&E, other companies, right? I'm hearing from a bunch of people, hey, some people are getting training. Some people are not getting training. There's no VOs. They're camera operators. There's crashes. There's flyaways. There's shoot downs. And I'm like, well, gee, this doesn't sound good. So I asked the general counsel over at the FAA. I said, hey, if the person that the waiver's name is in leaves the company, what does that do to the waiver? General counsel, we're going to send that over to the communications office. They send back an email, and it says that if the person listed on the waiver no longer works at the company, then the waiver is ineffective. Okay, not me, FAA. Oh, okay, well, I tell them, this guy left the company, so what are we going to do? I alerted Dan Elwell. I alerted Earl Lawrence, Jeremy Grogan, Chow, people over at the AOPA, ALPA, HAI. Hey, this may be an unsafe situation. I called the local FSDO. I talked to the manager. I said, you got an office out here in Folsom. They're flying for PG&E in your jurisdiction. FSDO manager, I don't know anything about this. I didn't know anyone's flying drones. People are flying drones which I was a little taken aback. And he's like, well, I'm going to have to contact DC. I said, well, who do you think told me to call you? People in DC, you're the guy, man in charge. Anyway, his thing was, who put the bee in your bonnet, buddy? I said, okay, well, it appears that there may be unsafe operations going on in the nest. Might want to send someone out to look at it. Okay? All right, well, we'll see. So they did. They opened an investigation. And New Year's Eve here, I sent an email and I asked, how's the investigation coming along? Well, I get the call from the new manager at the FSDO. He tells me, hey, look, I don't know anything about this. Anything about any of this Precision Hawk stuff, I don't know. Okay, give me your email. He gives me his email. I type it into my email thing here. His name comes up. I go, well, you're CC'd on all of this. I sent in over all the information, the correspondence from the head office, all of it. And it just started ringing a bell. I go, here, I'll send it back to you. Oh, yeah, this doesn't look good. No, it doesn't look good. So the upshot on the deal, they called me back a week later, the woman that did the investigation. She said, well, I called out there, and they said that, Diana Cooper is on the waiver. And I'm like, she's on the 107.3.1 waiver? Well, no. They did say that Thomas Hahn did quit. And I go, oh, okay, so did you go out there and look at the logbooks? We don't have the resources to make out-of-office visits. Now, this is all how this FAA policy, regulation, and enforcement. This is how the cogs all mesh over here, right? Don't have the resources to go make a site visit. Okay, great. Well, but where are we at with the investigation now? Oh, funny you should ask. We closed it in July, early July. We got an email from FAHQ, and they said that they were already talking to you, and so we just closed the investigation. Nobody went out there to see if anything was good. No, we just figured we closed it. So now I had to ask. I had asked for clarification on this, and they told me to make FOIA requests. And now I'm going to have to try and FOIA request of the emails that they got from HQ to tell them to shut down an investigation on actual unsafe flights without a beyond visual line of sight, and a valid beyond visual line of sight waiver in the NAS. And that is the CEO is the chairman of the DAC.
Yeah. That's the real takeaway from this. He is the chairman of the Drone Advisory Council. But that aside, but other than that, it's fine. It's all fine.
I mean, we're told how the whole mission is safety of the NAS.
Yeah.
We're told how balances. We're told how we need all of this regulation. Yet they don't have the resources to go out and make a site visit at an office that's 5 miles away. I mean,
is it that close? Is it?
It may be a little further,
but it's close. It's close.
It's within. I'm pretty sure it's within 10 or 15 miles. I haven't Googled it, but and it doesn't really matter. The FAA is supposedly spending $69 million a year integrating drones into the NAS, and you don't have the resources to look at logbooks.
Yeah. Well, look, I've said it, and I'm going to say it again. It's the FAA. They need a lot more oversight. They've been allowed to get too big and too powerful. Too many cocktail parties have ensued, I'm sure, and that needs to be undone. Because they should be aviators working for other aviators. They should be making the NAS safe. They should be integrating our PAS as a happy, look, here comes the future sort of a thing, not just thinking, oh, here's a threat. Because I also think that a lot of regulators think it's a bit of a threat to their jobs. They can see them going away. Now, on that, Ian, tell us a joke. Come on, this is all we've got. Oh, go on. Sorry, Bruce.
I was just going to say it's a trend I've noticed with bureaucrats and officials is instead of when you come to them with a problem, instead of them saying how can we help, it's how can we hinder. It's like it's their job to stand in your way rather than facilitate, and that's changed dramatically in recent times.
It's interesting, that they've got a lot to lose, and that's the reality. Look, the aviation industry is probably one of the slowest for change there is, isn't it, in the world? Nothing happens overnight in the aviation industry. What's happening today is what was happening 4 years ago, and there's a lot of people who probably have a lot of interest in things not changing, and UAS is the biggest fundamental change in aviation since we've had air traffic control. That's the reality of it. What's changed in aviation in the last 30 years? Very little, really, has it? There's been more aircraft, but fundamentally the whole system has remained the same, and this is a massive shake-up of that, and I'm guessing they don't want that.
Hang on, I've already had a letter from In Situ. That didn't take long. No, Orbital UFA shipping second engine model to Boeing subsidiary In Situ. So that's not the thing. But I got a hell of a fright when the word In Situ came up in my email. Said, but there we are. You missed that bit. We were popping at them earlier. Yeah, okay. No, not a lot has changed in aviation. Perhaps a little bit more general aviation. No, less general aviation, but certainly more paragliders, gliders, balloons. Light sport aircraft. That's been a big change.
But it doesn't really affect commercial, does it? Massively. The commercial aspect is out the way. They're on big airports. They have total control of that. You don't get a lot of balloons and stuff flying into Gatwick, or they stick to the smaller sites, don't they? And I just think if you look at it, it's a bit of a boys' club. If you look at it very basic, it very much feels like a bit of a boys' club for the last 30 years, and suddenly someone wants to come and smash that up, and they don't like it.
And Michael Bolland saying in the comments, I'll put it up, they're targeting commercial drone flights by civil aviation operators. It
is interesting what thing says, because sorry, my brain is fried because I'm a bit off the guard. I haven't started yet. Oh no, I'm allowed to kick in now. What Patrick said is, if they can't enforce now, how are they going to enforce with all of this legislation that's around the corner? They're about to introduce a fundamental change to Model RC, where you would need boots on the ground to be able to enforce on a mass level what they're proposing. Yet they can't go and see one company. So
you only need to do about 100 people, don't you? And make sure that gets in the press. Maybe not even 100 people.
Does it?
Hang them out to dry.
Speeding? People get done for speeding every day. Does it stop people speeding?
No.
That's true. That's true. All right. Fair point. You shot me down in an instant. You're right. Exactly right. Yeah.
Can I want to interject. And the thing that I want to interject here is, we're not talking about, there is only a handful of beyond visual line of sight waivers. A handful, a small handful. There are 100 people attached, plus or minus, attached to the UASIO. So you're going to make this dude, who is part of the Pathfinder, Precision Hawk, CEO, beyond visual line of sight waiver guy. You're not even going to do the due diligence to pick up the phone and go, hey, thinking about making you, the chairman of this DAC thing. We don't want to look like bigger jackasses than the guy that was on drugs at the Boeing thing. So how's this beyond visual line of sight thing going? You guys all in compliance? You got data? You have any mishaps? What's cooking? Oh, okay. It's all. All right. Hey, have a good day.
Very simple. Is there anything here that's going to bite us on the ass? It's a very simple term, isn't it, Patrick? And that's all it takes. And they're not even doing that, are they?
I do it all the time to Gary. He's, when the heat shield, I'm just like, you just talk to Gary. I think Gary emailed me. He's like, what are you doing? Oh, my God.
We've had a couple of emails. Yes. We've had a few communications.
Well, not only that, but Gary knows too that there's certain folks, companies, entities, whatever that I go after, and then Gary's got to take a few days off of work to keep the site up.
Yes, that is actually true. That is actually true. That's happened more than once. We have denial of service attacks and all those other great things that start happening. Oh, you laugh a minute. That is, yeah.
Well, I think so they've got like 48 of them. Is what I'm reading off. So I updated as January 14th. So there's 48 beyond visual line of sight waivers. One of the first people to get them is Precision Hawk, and they can't even stay on top of that one. And they have contact with these people at all of the shows and the junkets and all the rest of that. It's just anyone who believes that any of this policy, and this was one of the things I said back in the ARC, you can have all of the inane policy and rules and all the rest of the whatever you want. If there's no enforcement, it's never going to work. And it's never going to work because it's a shift, a dynamic shift. And the shift is if I'm flying around in a manned aircraft and I don't follow the rules or best practices, I get weeded out rather quickly. The droner just has to run back down to Best Buy with the credit card and be like, oh. And they're back in business. So totally different dynamic. They're never going to be able to
plenty of people have been that skin in the game argument. Not plenty, but a few people have been killed on the ground by aircraft falling out of the sky that were not part of the activity. So the skin in the game is one thing. It does. I need to think about that a bit more and find out some more. That doesn't annoy me.
The other thing is, skin in the game doesn't always guarantee people aren't going to do stupid things, or there'd be very few fatalities in the GA space. A lot of people forget how vulnerable their skin is, and they just do stupid stuff and kill themselves and other people. So I don't know, because the regulators always raise this, oh yes, but manned aviation has skin in the game, and I think it's grossly overstated. I don't think it plays as much of a part as people think.
Now that you guys asked how many of these waivers we've got, I'm going to shoot this over to you, Gary, and you can post this because I thought they went back and the FAA fixed the website. They haven't fixed the website. They still have Thomas Hahn as the responsible party on the Beyond Visual Line of Sight waiver for Precision Hawk. I mean, where I don't get out much, lately. But in other countries, I mean, is your government this inept?
Well, I can only
Besides
speak
Gary, besides Gary, because you live in South Africa.
Well, yeah.
There's a qualifier.
Well, yeah.
No.
Well, I can only speak to the when I had to deal with the regulator quite a lot in the UK as a chief pilot for a couple of companies, and they were very on the ball. And if they picked up stuff on social media, or if they picked up anything, they'd be on the phone saying, has this, that, or the other happened? And when they come around to check your paperwork, watch out, you better have all the paperwork there. Very friendly with it, not unfriendly doing it, but you knew they pitched up. You knew you had to have everything there. And you would hope, I think the biggest takeaway for me is that the FSDO office, I'm not sure quite what that office is, your local FAA office there, didn't know about the Beyond Visual Line of Sight operations within his region. That to me is a huge safety disconnect. He should at least know about it. And then obviously that office is the office that's just popping down to the occasional flight and making sure all the paperwork's in order. So that there's a big failure in communication.
But let's face it, it's all about paperwork, because I haven't heard of one instance where the people who make up all the paperwork for Beyond Visual Line of Sight and who decide whether a waiver is going to be granted or not, I've not heard of one instance where these people have been to people like Nicola, people who've flown Beyond Visual Line of Sight for a long time, done so very safely. They haven't spoken to the experts. They just pluck stuff out of their ass and say, this is what you need to do to fly safely beyond Visual Line of Sight. So it's all down to compliance with paperwork rather than actually speaking to people who have done it so many times it becomes second nature to them. So again, I think with the FAA, safety is one of their top 10 priorities, but not that high up the list.
I'm gobsmacked we're calling Nicholas safe now.
Yeah.
When did that happen?
That's his street name. That is extraordinary now. If you've been following on, Patrick's pointed out to the FAA that this bloke, Thomas Hahn, no longer works at Precision, or he is the man on a bit of paper for their BV loss
September
approval. And look, on the January the 14th, he still works there. Bada bing, bada boom. That is.
When people say, gosh, that Egan guy is a nitpicker and he's always upset. You know why? Because I've had to sit in rooms with these people for almost 20 years and hear the platitudes and the hypocrisy and all the rest of it. So, I'm going to do a story on this. I just, did some more FOIAs today, and they're trying to stretch this out as long as they can. But be made aware. I emailed, including the AOPA, ALPA, the rest of the gang, everybody, HAI, everybody about this. And, there is no action. So either, in my mind, it's either like a total breakdown of the system, okay, or possibly this risk has been overblown because you don't even need a guy that's in charge of safety and everything's cool. And you can fly all over the I mean, I don't, if the weed grower shoots you down, is that a mishap?
Well, you mentioned our dysfunctional government. Here, you cannot have a company with less than 3 employees, and you have to have the safety officer, this officer, that officer, all the things that it doesn't seem like you need over there, which it's great to some extent. Yeah, amazing. I'm amazed.
Well,
let's move on from this just annoying. I'm fine. That's trouble. Every week now, I'm just getting more annoyed about all sorts of things.
You must be one annoyed dude. How's the progress coming at Vertiport Africa?
We've had a bit of rain. It's quite nice. There's some nice indigenous stuff coming up. And yesterday, we even had a light aircraft. He must have been. He must have heard about it, and he did a flyby as he came. I was reading a book to the 4-year-old on the porch there. And I said, "Oh, there's an aeroplane coming. He's quite low," and he said, "Yes, he is, Dad." And we looked at the registration as he went past eye level with us. As he flew, he letterboxed into our valley and headed towards a thunderstorm. It was hosing down with rain to the west of us. And he letterboxed into the next valley at very low level in a thunderstorm, because manned aviation is a very safe thing. It's a very safe thing indeed.
Perhaps he had no skin.
Google the burrito. Did you see a burrito?
Didn't see a burrito, but I did see the registration. That's even with my duff eyesight. It was because it was right there. But yeah, so Vertiport. So if Vertiport Africa was working, of course I quickly looked at my ADSB setup, and he wasn't on ADSB. And but yeah, we would have needed quite a few more receivers to pick that one up at distance, because he was very, very low level indeed.
Stone throw from the Vertiport.
You could have if I couldn't, because I'm rubbish at sport, but someone with a good throw would have been able to hit it. Definitely. Definitely. No, so the Vertiport is coming along.
In your family, didn't you have a cricket meister in your family?
We weren't necessarily known for our sporting prowess. Our families, not necessarily. I think we go out and win empires, that sort of a thing. We haven't got time for this game. Ian, tell us a joke. Come on, this is going to nonsense.
Joke.
What have you seen this week, Ian? That's caught your eye.
I saw. I don't know if you spoke about this whole drone story about people seeing drones is pretty much now been put to bed, hasn't it? That there's like no evidence at all.
Has it been put? Well, I did mention at the top that I've had 5 inquiries from the media about it, and So who's put it to bed?
I was reading the story just now that there's no evidence has been found, is there? They've been looking all week, and there's just nothing.
Since when do they need evidence? Have they not heard of Gatwick?
Well, yes, exactly. The Colorado Department of Public Safety said is scaling back its investigation into reports of unexplained drone sightings after finding 0 evidence. So they're scaling it back. It's a bit of a weird one, this, because there's a lot of people said they've seen something. So this is a classic of either I've seen 3 red cars, therefore every car is red, and everyone says the same thing, because people do have a habit of liking to be the same as someone else. And there's a really couple of good scientific studies around this. So if you get 5 people say, "Oh yeah, I like this," the next 5 will want to say the same thing if they've heard them say it. And whether it's something to do with that, or whether there was talk, would the SpaceX launch been that area? I haven't looked too deeply.
There was some at the beginning of the sightings. I think there was one right at the beginning. Starlink or whatever it is.
Starlink.
I saw a TV report from a reporter in the field with camera, where they said that the drones were so close they could hear the propellers, and they felt it was only 100 feet above their head. And they had footage, and it looked like a fixed wing with LEDs on the wingtips and the tail. That's pretty good evidence. I mean, it was there, it was video, it was the people on the ground telling they could hear the props and they could, it flew over their heads at 100 feet. How can that not be evidence?
It's bizarre, isn't it? It's amazing how we can lose aircraft. Then again, we're very good at losing aircraft, even ones with a couple of hundred people on board. So at the end of the day, I suspect it's someone locally at the end. Someone's probably just flying out testing something, and he's probably afraid to come forward now because of the media attention. Because the reality is, the poor bugger's probably done nothing wrong. Yet the
I
whole
think he would have
bloody world-
stopped by now, then, but they're still going.
Yeah, it's a weird one, isn't it? It is a weird one.
I'm going to drag the FAA again. How many aircraft did the FAA actually lost, Patrick? Was it 4,000 or 5,000 off the N register?
Oh no! Are you talking about when? You talking about years ago when they misplaced 90,000 aircraft?
90,000. That was the number. That was it. That's right. Yes, 90,000 kids. 90,000 lost aircraft. Count them. It'll take a while, but 1 a second, 90,000 seconds.
What's, give or take 50, 80,000 aircraft. Look, this is another story I want to do this year, because SUAS News is like CNN. I got a whole, newsroom over here of people working.
Yes.
Okay, so, we talk about safety of the NAS numbers, and you remember when they lost to 90,000 aircraft. How the safety of the NAS is they have what's called a GAA-TA survey. And the FAA is going to have to do something else because the GA fatalities are going up. So they're going to have to come up with something. So what they do is they extrapolate the numbers from the returned surveys they get, which you don't have to have your logbook present. It's just from memory. And then you say, well, I flew however many takeoffs and landings, however many hours. Okay, great. Then they take those numbers, they average those, and then they times all of the registered aircraft. And that at 90,000 aircraft added up to a boatload of extra hours that were flown safely in the NAS.
Yeah, that's right.
If you're misplaced 90,000 aircraft, manned aircraft, how are you going to do this drone thing? The other thing that gets me is
Disney made a movie, and it was just one dinosaur that was missing, and they made a whole documentary about that. It's only one dinosaur.
Well, even now with the registration deal, they're like, we have 1 million aircraft registered. Are those aircraft? Are they people?
I forward, and I know how it works with the FAA. It'll take forever. I said, where did you get those numbers from that you've put in?
They're bogus.
I know they are. I know, but I've asked them. Well, because
they're probably like, oh God, wait, what? Oh Jesus, there's another malcontent over there at SUAS.
Yes,
vegan guy. But what I wanted to get to, the other story I want to do is in 2018 we had 393 fatalities from GA. And how many fatalities did we have from drones in the United States? We had okay. And what happens is, as far as I'm concerned, AOPA used to we have to have an equivalent level of safety. And I said, well, you're going to have to watch what you say because one day that can come back and get you. So now we're at a place where we have all of these restrictions on drones. We've got the FAA's watching the hen house, and they're not leaving any stone unturned. Every beyond visual line of sight waiver is being logged, and checked, and double checked, and cross checked. To determine what types of data, we're going to allow different things to happen. And yet we don't have all of these people dying. And we have all of these restrictions. So what happened to the equivalent level of safety thing?
Absolutely. I'm just going to put that there. Hashtag no GA below 2K. Getting them up and getting them out there. Let's get them out of the way. And we're only thinking about their safety because they'll be able to make contact with air traffic if something goes wrong, and they'll have much longer time to find a suitable field to land in if the donk quits. It's all about safety and love towards our manned aviation brethren.
It's something else, Gar. I don't know. I can't remember. Have we discussed this? Now, obviously, the Rotor Riot thing. Has that? Did we discuss that?
What, the black cat?
Yeah.
Or whatever it is, red cat, purple cat.
I can't remember if that was last week or this week because it's been a busy
week
one.
before. It's the week before, but yeah. Yeah.
I don't. That's caused a bit more of a stir. It seems to have been landing a bit now with people, and it's nothing new. It's been on the cards for 6 months, but there's a bit of a war brewing within. There's always a bit of a war brewing within the Rotor Riot community if you do follow that one. And I know JB's been a little bit vocal on certain aspects of it, in the sense of how I think they feel they're being treated a little bit unfairly, and the whole thing seems to be blowing up again with Black Sheep and all of that lot. And I try not to follow it too closely, but it's hard not to see some of the interesting posts when you skim through some of the Facebook groups. But really,
it's a pity, isn't it? Because as as Bruce has said before, it takes a unified voice in these things, and it's a perfect time to make people less unified.
Yeah, and that's happening, and then that's been kicking off. Obviously, there's been CS is obviously finished now, and reality is not a lot came out of that from the drone point of view, other than Autel. No other manufacturers have really dropped anything at all. Not even a lot of great consumer technology, if I'm honest. I've not seen anything that I've thought is great. There is a camera that's landed, which is the Insta360?
Yeah. We spoke about that. Yeah.
But that's about it. It's really
Ian,
strange time.
Is the 8K camera on the Autel? Is it really 8K? Can you
well, I've caused a bit of trouble on that this week. I'm certainly not on Autel's Christmas card list. Put it that way.
That's one of the provisos of being on this hangout. Is that you remove yourself from people's Christmas card lists.
I spent a few days looking at this before I put it out, and I look, if I ever do something like this, I always run it past more than one person. I'm lucky that I have a group of people in the RC industry that I talk to regularly, and some idiots like me and some fantastic people 10 times better than me. And we all sort of come to the same conclusion on this, that the evidence was that there's a little bit of marketing hype going on here, to say the least. And there's a bit of this I really don't like, and that is how it will change how drones are marketed from now on. And that's what my concern is with this, because there is a standard rule most camera manufacturers and most drones have played up till now, is the pixel count they're giving you is a true reflected pixel count. There's none of this inflation through other methods, until what Autel appear to have done, and they appear to be using a legitimate method. It's what they're saying is technically correct on paper, but it is never designed to be used to increase resolution. It was designed to give better HDR imaging and the ability for the camera to behave better in the very brightest of conditions. Now, they've found a way of tuning that into something it was not designed to, because we have a lot more processing now. And the basics are that, yes, on paper, it is a 48 megapixel sensor, but it is not a 48 megapixel sensor in the sense of an A7R3 is a 42 megapixel sensor, and even their 20 megapixel one is 20. It's basically a 12 megapixel sensor setup with this thing called a quad Bayer filter, and they're just measuring each color point 4 times rather than once. So I looked at it, and yeah, and all they've done is split it 4 ways, and that's all they're doing. Whereas at the moment, a standard RGB pixel consists of 2 green, 1 red, 1 blue. All that part of the filter remains the same, but instead of having a single photo site beneath each of them, there is 4 individual photo sites. So the green will be actually measured 8 times, the blue 4, the red 4. But it isn't creating resolution. The lens is still the same. The Bayer filter on top of it is still the same. And whilst it will create a file of 8 megapixels in video, the second you start looking at this, it's going to fall apart with pixel peeping, because it's creating resolution. It's no different to this intelligent frame creation that's on a lot of these TVs now as well. The studios are kicking up holy hell about this, and they want this feature to be turned off as standard because they don't like how it behaves. They're not doing anything naughty, but it isn't apples for apples compared to every other drone sold. No other manufacturer has done this up till now. And that's the bit I don't like, because it will.
It'll become the trend,
It
won't
will
it?
become the trend. So, what we have is a base product with a 48 megapixel camera and a pro product with a 20 megapixel camera. And you ask yourself, well, why is one 48 and one's 20? Well, one's a 1-inch sensor, one's a half-inch sensor, but still, it doesn't make a lot of sense. So, I did a video on it. I went quite in depth on it to try and put it out there. It's been interesting to watch the feedback. Some of it's been good. Some of it's I've gained a lot more haters than I had before, which I find quite amusing, which is always fun. But I just don't like where it will take. It's unfair on the likes of Skydio. It's not apples for apples, and you got people going, this is so much better, and it isn't. And I'm intrigued to see how this sensor behaves with ND filters, because I have a feeling it is not going to like an ND filter. Because the reason you use an ND filter is because you don't have the ability to control the aperture on these cameras. So you need to reduce the amount of light going in. Now, that's where these sensors fall over, is because they want lots of light. So the second you drop the light entering it, you're going to see all sorts of weird behavior. So it might look very good overall most of the time, because the reality is a drone is in the sky where it's very bright and the images you're taking are generally very bright anyway, so it should look okay. But the second the light level drops, it's going to fall over.
I got a word of advice for you, and I got this from another YouTube channel, and maybe Bruce can back me up on this one, but I hear if you really want to be popular on YouTube, you tell people what they want to hear.
That's right, Patrick. You're right, Patrick. Yes, Patrick's right.
Yeah, well, I don't.
I understand that's supposed to work quite well with drone news websites as well. So we fall down and this.
I don't like bashing products, and I'm not bashing it. I just don't. I think it's slightly deceptive.
But they've just copied DroneX. They've taken a leaf out of DroneX's marketing book.
Yeah, and if you were to go out and buy a camera, any other camera, its resolution generally will be correct, and technically it is. And I said they're not lying; it's a technicality, but it's a technicality no one else is doing. And that's the bit I didn't particularly like about it. But they will live or die by it. And at the end of the day, if it doesn't work very well, they will be torn apart for it. And many phone manufacturers were last year. This stunt was pulled by a couple of phone manufacturers last year, and they all got shredded over it because it doesn't do what people want it to do for the most part. And most of the camera manufacturers dumped it. They stopped doing it. And so it gives you a hint. If someone tries doing something and then it doesn't work and they go back to the old method, that really tells you the truth behind it, doesn't it?
Well, here in the United States, how it works is people say, hey, this is a for-profit show, so negative comments are not really welcome. And that's at the drone shows. That's pretty much at anything. I got a invite to go to the SHOT Show, which is a huge gun show here in Las Vegas. And a disclaimer for the press right there was like, if you write critical stories, this is a for-profit show. We don't want that. I mean, what is a critic to do in an industry where nobody wants to hear any bad news? Can someone please help me out with that?
Bruce, what's your take on it? Because you'll know as much as any of us on this stuff.
Yeah, you're pretty much right. And I think the problem is that now we're getting down, the market has dramatically reduced overnight because of all the regulations and things. People are having a hard job selling drones. Also, we've got this period where the NPRM is out there. The stuff you buy today, you may not be able to use tomorrow, except not even in a grassy field, because you can't fly them at a freer if it's a non-compliant drone. So these things could have an incredibly short shelf life. So the manufacturers are trying to outbid each other in terms of what we're offering you for your dollar. And I think that Autel, okay, they've got a drone that has anti-collision on it and it flies okay. And so what's going to be their point of distinction? How can they go better than Skydio or go better than DJI? And they didn't have anything except to say, well, this has got an 8K sensor in it. So that's the only point of distinction they could really make. So from a commercial point of view, they had bean counters pushing them like hell. The marketing department saying, we're professionals, we can do it. And the result was that it's somewhat misrepresented.
Yeah, it's annoying because, and my concern is we will end up with this now because, if you look at, you've got Skydio, you've got DJI, you've got the others, they're all going to have to play the same game. And that's the part I find distasteful, because the reality is they're being backed into a corner here now. Once someone does it, it's very hard for everyone else not to, if they start selling. Now, this might sound
look at the version. Sorry, but look at the version numbers on Pixels. People are just adding, just calling it 6, 7, 9. Version 54. 54 must be better than version 2.
I'm not sure that the other I'm not sure the other manufacturers will need to do it because they've already got their points of distinction. DJI is the leader in drone technology. They have the Mavic Mini, which is the sub 250 camera drone, and Skydio's got its unrivaled collision avoidance system. So they've got points of distinction. It was poor old Autel had nothing. Everyone else has got a 4K camera. Everyone else has got basic anti-collision stuff. So they had to come up with something, and this is the best they can come up with. The others don't have to. They already have their points of distinction on which they intend to sell.
It's interesting about that, because this might sound harsh, but for the most part, Autel do clone what DJI do. They always have. It's hard. The X-Star was a Phantom. The Evo is a replica Mavic. It's hard not to say it isn't when they literally took the same design of the aircraft. And it is interesting because if you go, Skydio did their own thing. Unique have always done their own thing. I love the Unique H. It's a fantastic craft. No one seems to want to buy it en masse, but it is a very, very good aircraft. Whereas it's hard not to say Autel don't just take and put their flavor on it. The only other, no one else has copied the Mavic other than Autel, other than the cheap ones that Bruce we've spoke about before. But Autel are the only one that's really taken this fold-in drone, and it is very, very similar. So I suppose they have to have something to separate themselves. Parrot do their own thing, Unique do their own thing, Skydio do their own thing. Autel seem to just try and jump off the back of what is successful and try and produce a product. And actually, to be fair, they're solid products. The drones, everyone who's had one, and I know a couple of guys with them, they're absolutely great bits of kit. They work really well. They get very few problems with them, but they don't really do much of their own development. That's probably the fairest way of putting it.
Well, sorry, I was just jumping on a comment for Chris. I forced there. The original reason for 500-foot lower limit for manned aircraft. It was just to avoid houses. It's just to avoid to bother people less on the ground, and it pretty much became an accepted thing. And you're supposed to be able to land clear. You're supposed to actually always be able to land clear of any obstructions on the ground, buildings, people, and all that sort of anything. And 500 foot is just a good number. And then 400 foot, does anyone know where the 400 foot bit really came from?
120 meters.
Just to provide that 100 foot of vertical separation, isn't it?
Yeah, that's my thinking as well. But there's probably it came about somewhere, but who knows?
It's probably not enough though, because if you're running barometric altimeters and you're flying throughout the day and you've taken off from one point, you may be, unable to guess or calculate. And also, it's above ground, so your altimeter doesn't really tell you that. It tells you above the point you took off, really, doesn't it? Because you don't know what the height of the ground is below you. So all those things mean that it's not 100 feet isn't enough. I think what can we come up with? No GA below 1,999 feet. What do you think, Gary?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, exactly. Well, it's only 3 millibars or 3 hectopascals, isn't it? It's 100 feet, so that's all it's got to change as you go across your pressure setting regions. If you're en route, you should be setting QNH off seaside level. So then you would be able to look at your chart that you have with you, and then you'd be able to work it out quickly in your head above ground. But yeah, lots of calculations, isn't it? Much safer just to keep them up. Keep them up. Get them out of the way. Much, much easier. 16K drone from UAV Shed. Well, what would you show? What would you show on a 16K drone? Where would you show it?
Look, there's already a problem now. No one is going to be able to edit 8K. Very few can edit 4K, let alone 8K. And the ones who do edit 4K mostly do it in H.264 because H.265 HVC is very difficult unless you've got.
I did a 4K video this morning with H.265, Sorry.
Did it work? Did it behave?
Yeah, it was
That
great.
version
Wonderful.
of Unreal.
Yeah,
Wonderful
but it-
editing experience.
And that's how I follow my 15 followers on YouTube. The 4K experience. No, I'm just kidding. Hey, we have a skin in the game story. Some California elementary school students were hurt when a plane apparently dumps fuel over the playground.
That when I was a lad, obviously, like last week or the week before, there was a sailing competition off of Seaton in Devon, on the coast, in the bay, in Lyme Bay. You're sitting comfortably, and a Hercules come over them and did dump all its fuel on all the little sailing boats because it had a problem, and it changed the colour of all the sails, and all hell broke loose. After that, there was a hell of a claim from there. Anyway, yes, children doused with fuel. what a happy picture.
Only thing I've just remembered, GoPro have fixed the Karma.
Oh yes, that's right. They have. Yes.
Fair
Well,
play to
only
them.
the latest problem. No one can fix the karma.
Yeah. Sorry, I should have had that. They fixed the issue that they created themselves. That should never have been there, which means it wouldn't fly. But to be fair to them, less than 2 weeks? I suppose, considering I didn't think they'd have anyone who could do it, to be fair, that's pretty
And that's
good.
pretty good service for the 8 people that own them. It's
Yeah,
pretty
yeah.
good.
Wasn't the Karma the drone that also dumped its fuel in flight?
Yes.
Yeah, it did dump its fuel.
Very much so.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's solid
Exactly.
fuel, solid propellant.
Stations, though, to me, I mean, when you look at the investment in DJI, it's like a sealing wax producer conversation. Well, this company makes a great color red or whatever. I don't really see any credible threats to DJI anytime in the near future. I mean, Skydio is great, but where's that being made? And where's the investment? You would think someone would step in and say, hey, we've got this, at least it's American software or whatever.
Yeah.
And they would step in and say, hey, we're going to fund this company. The other thing, and I don't know if I'm the only guy noticing it here, but okay, so did anyone read the article about DJI's subsidiary's new LiDAR?
Yeah. That's pretty cool. Yeah,
$400. Okay. I was talking to Greg Kretzinger the other day, our fire friend,
Yeah.
plant specialist. He's telling me this DJI with their multispectral plant sensor on it. He says, man, it works. It works. I should have probably outed him because all of his other customers are going to be like, what? Why did you say it works? He said, but it works. And he doesn't even know that DJI knows what they've got. But the system is robust. It's cheap. Kind of reminds me of the line that Peter Sellers and Dr. Strangelove. He's talking about the Japanese, but they make bloody good cameras. And that's what I'm starting to think with the Chinese DJI. Damn it!
Well, it's the same story, isn't it? Really, just a few years down the line, the Chinese are, the Japanese were thought to make rubbish, weren't they, for many years? And look at them now.
But it is interesting. If you look at it, there isn't a big Chinese camera company neither. If we look at that side, the camera manufacturers are still very much Japanese. Sony, Canon, Nikon, they all are still very much in that base. And it is interesting that there hasn't been anyone step up. And it does make you wonder if that's where DJI will end up at some point. There's clearly a hole as a big camera manufacturer in China, yet no one is really filling it.
DJI was reported that they were going to make a Sony knockoff camera, which I know they can do. I mean, most of the components for all of these camera companies are made in China, and the TVs and all the rest of it. However, I have to add a word of caution to the folks that go to the DJI Airworks show, because a lot of these people are running over there and they're trying to showcase their products that work with DJI and the SDK and all the rest of that. Is anyone besides me noticing a trend?
In which way? Well, there's lots of trends. Well,
the trend that I'm seeing from Airworks is like, hey, come on down and showcase your IP. Because if it looks like, you can spend all of your VC money and go out and proselytize and tell people how great this is, and it catches on. We're going to knock you off with this cheap LiDAR. It's going to be great. We love it. Or our RTK or our multispectral. You know, some of these companies that make multispectral cameras, these sensors are really expensive, and then you have to buy software. It's proprietary. It's difficult to use. You try and integrate these systems, and it doesn't work. Well, you know, here's the Phantom 4 out of the box, baby, and it's working.
Yeah.
So, you know, we've kind of co-opted your deal. I know even this new LiDAR, right? $400, Gary?
Yeah, but the other one's $100, isn't it? The one from someone else.
Velodyne?
The Velodyne one.
Or
The new Velodyne.
Well, it must have been leaked that DJI was coming out with their own. Because, you know, you see, this is another thing with the driverless cars here in California. I mean, I always got run over by one, and I was down in Stanford last week. They're bristling with these LiDAR sensors, you know. Nobody really, you know, talks about that, but the cost of just the LiDAR for the driverless cars is really expensive. So this stuff is, and the price is down to $100 or $400. Could be a game changer.
Could be a game changer. Well, yeah, it will. I think it will be in many ways. A bit further up in the comments, we had a comment about ADS-B. I don't know who wants to field that, and that was about why aren't we using ADS-B? I'm sorry, I haven't got to it, and I feel guilty.
ADS-B.
Where is it now?
Well,
I'll
the
get
US
there. Here we are,
rules-
Tim. There we are. Tell me again why adapting existing short-range, low-power ADS-B technology for UTM is not as good as developing a brand new technology and retrofitting 10 million. Trouble is, there will be
too easily. This is the thing. They want to make sure that they know, you know, they don't want spoofing. It has to be encrypted and then proprietary and tamper-proof. They don't want people spoofing. It's okay to spoof a full-size airplane, but you can't spoof a toy.
It's interesting actually because all of the regulation is basically anti-ADS-B on UAS. The US regulation is basically saying we're not going to allow it from an ADS-B out point of view. In the EU, there's no mandate for it either. They're all moving away from ADS-B completely. Now, everyone is going to introduce it, ironically, as a receiving side. DJI have already committed to it for 2020. The Cube Autopilot already has it in for receiving as well. It is going to be added to most off-the-shelf products as a receiving safety system, I suppose is probably the correct term to use. So you'll know where manned aircraft is. That is equipped. However, from an ADS-B out point of view, no one seems to want it at all, one little bit either.
Well, it was brought up in the small UAS ARC in 2008. And at the time, MITRE had a system that worked on an iPad or a Game Boy or these different devices, and you could just put it right on top of your car, and it would, FAA came in and poo-pooed the whole thing. Nope, never gonna work, not gonna work, won't ever work. And at the time, they were saying it wouldn't work because you would need to squawk and receive on the two different freaks, the GA freak and the one freak. But now, those guys from UAvionics, man, I mean, their stuff is pretty small. It would work. Yeah. My thing with it is they've always been talking about overwhelming the system with ADS-B, but I contend that I don't know that it's needed everywhere. I mean, are we going to have people squawking on all aircraft in all airspace? No. Why do we need it on drones? I don't even buy the need or the reason for the need for the RID. I really don't.
Even though the guys from UAvionics have done a fantastic job, and they have bashed down quite a few doors with the FAA and had to, and other regulators, and get their solution into aircraft. But even they'll tell you that ADS-B is not the solution for RPAS. The man from UAvionics will tell you that they don't think it is. There's not enough codes. It's designed in the 90s, as Bruce has said. It's not secure. There's not enough hexadecimal codes. It's very old tech. A lot of people believe it's new because the mandates happen now, 2020. It's been 30 years waiting for this to come along. So, yeah, look at the smartphone 30 years ago.
That's the problem with anything that the FAA does. I mean, it's next gen has been the same thing. Before it was next gen, it was I mean, even the model thing and the UAS thing has been going on since 1992. It takes the FAA decades to get anything done. So if they're going to say that ADS-B is not really a solution for manned or for unmanned aircraft, all of the reasons they list, it's not really a solution for manned aircraft.
No, it's not. It's not.
You know, they've implemented a red herring.
Well, the TCO GPS that you've got to use for it is donkey's old. It's a donkey's old standard of the ones that are the approved ones. You get a modern, but I can't think of anyone, pick a Chinese name GPS that has all the constellations or whatever and is tiny and costs $4. It's way better than the ones that you're supposed to put in these things. And then you subject yourself, was it ADS-B that fell over? What was it that fell over at the back end of last year? Because the rock project
Galileo
fell over. It was something else as well. Somebody Galileo fell over, yes. But there was another bit of avionics equipment that fell over because of GPS issues, again because it was older GPS, because that is what you had to have for it to be certified. And
was it the Iridium stuff, Gary, that you're talking? Because they just put up a whole new constellation.
Well, they're talking about. Let me have a look. It was in certain aircraft. Let me have a look. See what you just sing songs, or you just
ask questions of like the
It was ADS-B. It was last March, and
are you allowed to have that, Bruce?
It's under 250 grams.
Oh, I just want to be,
That's the other thing. With this NPRM thing, I'm actually working at the moment on a pretty comprehensive analysis of all the regulations in all the different parts of the world, because I'm a believer you can't just go out and criticize something. You've got to offer something better. Your criticism is only valid if you've done the work and you've come up with a better solution. So I'm sort of cherry picking all the different regulations from different parts of the world to bring together a chimera of regulation, which I believe represents all the best elements of the entire globe's drone regulations, and saying, here is the best solution. We've seen from Canada that sub 250 don't need prescriptive rules because that's been a thing for a year and there's been nobody killed, maimed, or no property smashed or broken. We've got New Zealand that has shielded operations. It removes the need to track, identify, do whatever with drones that are operating out of navigable airspace, which is below the treetops. All these little bits and pieces come together, and then you present it to the FAA and say, here is the best that the world's regulators around the world can come up with. Why do you think you know better than them?
Because we're the FAA, and we lead the way, and we have the safest, airspace system in the world. And
Boeing.
Oh, chicken. Okay, we had one failure. Some Africans died, and some other people died. I mean, now you're throwing the whole program out the window, Bruce. It sounds like you're nitpicking me. Now you're going to say the guy should get the $60 million severance package.
Yeah, this is why I'm keen to hear on that. But I was glad to hear about that thing with the FAA. I'm also planning to point out some of the FAA's failings and weaknesses, because you need to bring their credibility into account. All these other aviation authorities have got credible responses to the risks that are involved. FAA has proven it can't manage risk properly. That's why hundreds of people have died in MAX 8. So we need to say, well, who are you going to let manage these drones? The people who are responsible for hundreds of deaths every year in manned aviation, or the hobby, which has been self-regulating for 80 years and has killed just barely a handful of people? You don't put the idiots in charge of the good people.
Well, you would think that the people over at the AMA, I mean, that's what I told Rich. I'm like, I would with the kids and, the old folks, everybody working together, and the PR blitz, and let's say grassroots effort. There's been no grassroots effort. They tried some, last minute hokum, alert the membership. Most of the membership didn't even have emails at the time. You don't really need emails. You can have people write letters, whatever else. None of that materialized. But I'm like, you've got all of this good material that you could use to go to your Congress people, and your aviation lobbyists and consultants are giving you bogus information. And that's exactly what happened. If it were me, same with AUVSI, I tried to set up a deal with them where they would go to universities and have all engineering departments join, have all of their members in the various parts of the country get on the list, send out form letters that started out with boilerplate, and then you would write your stuff in there. And, they all said no. That's grassroots right there. Hey, I'm Professor Bag of Donuts. I got all of these kids here that are in the engineering department. This is going to adversely affect us. We're here trying to innovate, blah, 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 jobs, STEM education, yada, yada. Nobody's doing that. They're paying limousine money to these people over here in D.C. that, even when the last reauthorization came out, they were giving this on Twitter, Gary, because they know Gary loves when I go on Twitter and he's like, oh, Jesus. But I actually complimented the lobbyists. I'm like, you guys did such a good job of screwing this deal up. It will take millions and millions of dollars to fix the missteps that you guys made. So you should be in business for the next 20 years and be able to afford to send your kids to Stanford. Can't listen to the lobbyists. The only thing the lobbyists are good for is they do tell you how the public process is going to work. But the droners are smarter than the lobbyists. I do have to give them credit. They've said, look, if you do this, there's going to be ramifications, and you shouldn't really do that. Hey, Colin, put on a tie before you go testify to Congress. Flip-flops are not proper attire to go to this, things like that. A lot of this stuff was just flat out ignored, and these people thought they were smarter, and that's one of the ways we got where we are today.
Yeah. Head in sand doesn't affect us. It's not our model aircraft. It's them drones. It's them drones that are going to be taken out, not us with our model aeroplanes. And that attitude hasn't helped. I've seen the Causby thing come up a lot. In some ways, it feels a lot like 2007 at the minute. All the arguments that I saw back in 2007 are popping up again in social media again. It's like, no. That pony's been beaten to death a long time ago. It's a great shame. You do have Groundhog's Day? No, we don't. But we've all seen the movie, so we know now. We're now your cultural appropriation of the rest of the world via Hollywood is working well, and we've all been taken into that route. Yeah, I know what you mean. I know what you're talking about.
I think that's a good thing. And I would agree with you, Gary, that a lot of the same old arguments, and you've been in this long enough, and Bruce has been long enough. And I think we've all to have seen kind of what I like to call the regulatory wheel of suffering. Very Buddhist. And, you lose all your stuff every so many years. But what happens is, the new people come in, they go to the shows, they get all rah-rah, and then eventually they just bust out, and then a new crowd of people come in, and they get all rah-rah up, and they go ahead and they do this thing. And now even with this RID thing, the FAA is telling people that'll be 2 to 3 years. And, then we're going to be flying over people and beyond visual line of sight, and it's going to be great, and all your dreams are going to be realized. You're going to be picking up gold nuggets off the ground. Every time I go to the mountains here and I look into a river, because I'm here near the gold country, I'm always looking for nuggets, okay? All the time. And I didn't find nothing, okay? No nuggets. And I'm here in nugget country. It's just, it's just not happening. It's a confidence game. It's really too bad. It's just really horrible.
Yeah, no, it is. I'm just trying to find the wheel of suffering. Trying to get that up on here now, because we do have one of those.
We do. We have our own drone.
We have our own wheel. Yes, everyone should have their own wheel. Hang on. I found it.
Okay,
I have found the wheel.
I gotta send you another one. You'll probably remember this one from a long time ago, Gary, and it was the disenfranchisement. Oh
yeah. Here's our wheel of suffering.
Well, that's
this will be
integration graph, which blows people away. If that one doesn't scare folks, it should.
Look at that. That finished in 2017. That's when you made that one. I'll stop putting these up. This will be boring a dear viewer. Look, we need to be near 2 hours, so it must be time for us to go. Before we go, and it's the first day at school for my 4-year-old tomorrow, and I've been at school today as well teaching. So yeah, I better be on the money in the morning. Has anyone else seen anything else before we go? No. We're still going to be. We're talking about this all year, aren't we? Every single time, all year, it's going to be this remote ID. It's going to be terrible. All right, gentlemen. Thank you very much, dear viewer, wherever you are in the world. Thank you very much. 2100 GMT next week, and we look forward to seeing you then. Take care, everyone. Thanks very much. Cheers. Bye bye.